What do a cannabis farm, a wealth management firm, and Warren Buffett have in common? This guy. Meet the Southern entrepreneur who scaled and sold not one, but two companies, and somehow convinced Warren Buffett to make a deal. But it didn't start with his success. It started with burnout, self-doubt, and a bold leap from corporate America. This is the story of how trusting the wrong people almost broke him, and how trusting the right ones made him unstoppable. Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions.
Life has a way of, keep presenting the problem in different ways until you solve it. If it is a people problem and realizing, hey, they're a cancer in your organization, like that cancer needs to be removed, sure. But, there's a place for that employee. They're not happy because they're not aligned with your culture and your values and the way that you do things. They will be aligned somewhere else. It's just not with you.
Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions, the place to learn how to fund, scale, exit, and massively profit as an angel investor or entrepreneur. Brought to you by the Angel Investors Network. And now, here's your host, Jeff Barnes.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes, and I'm joined today by David Miller, who is in Barcelona right now. So, David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, really excited to have this conversation. Looking forward to getting to know more about you and your business, Scaling Magic. So, before we get into all the details of what it is you guys do, what you do specifically when it comes to scaling Alchemy, as we'll talk about, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, just Southern boy from Knoxville, Tennessee. Born and raised there. Went to University of Tennessee. Graduated. Worked in corporate America for about 5 years in compliance operations and sales. Left to start my entrepreneurial career in 2008. Built a firm over 15 years, scaled it, sold it. Built another firm in about 2.5 years to about the same size or similar type size, and sold that or exited that in a couple of years. A lot of timing and luck there, and so now I am educating the public on growing, exiting, merging, acquiring their businesses, advising CEOs on how to scale personally, from a business standpoint, all that, and living life.
Awesome. So what kind of firms were these that you were scaling up and exiting out of?
Across different industries. My first company that I built and scaled was in the financial space. We had a plethora of financial services, trading with the street, wealth advisory, to attestation, tax returns, family office type services. And then one of the other businesses was a cannabis business, B2C sites that vertically integrated farm all the way from production, growing, hydroponically indoors, processing, distributing to businesses and also individuals, customers.
Interesting. Yeah. So very varied industries there. Most people don't get out of financial services and think to go into cannabis. So I'm really curious about what that was like and why you decided to go that route.
Yeah. After being in the business for it's probably around 12 years or so, I was looking to make a change, and just took a hard look at what I'd done, what I accomplished, and along the way, Jeff, I had done some seed investing, angel investing, experienced some success helping on boards, helping entrepreneurs grow more in mentor capacity. And so I'd seen a lot of different industries, and I just took a hard look at what was important to me and where I wanted to go. I wanted to do something completely different to see what kind of challenge I could take over. And the cannabis industry just kind of fell in my lap. I had a lot of things in my life that affected me going that direction, as far as people that have been impacted by the space in a positive way. So that's really how I was led to it.
Very cool. You said you started out your career in corporate America, as a lot of us do, and then eventually decided to go, start up and run your own firm. So what was going on in your life at that point? What made you decide to make that transition to going out there and becoming an entrepreneur? Because a lot of people think about it, but they never actually take that leap.
Yeah, so I was in an entrepreneurial type role in the beginning. I built a book of business clients in the wealth management space from nothing as a 22-year-old, and so there was a good entrepreneurial aspect there. And then I was really interested in leadership. That's why I joined American Express, the firm at the time, Fortune 50 company. So they had great training, great systems in place. And it got to a point where I'd done, like, as I mentioned, compliance, sales, operations mainly in the sales aspect. And my entrepreneurial spirit clashed with the multitude of management changes in a short period of time. And that's what led me to start my own firm.
That's fair. Yeah. Eventually that entrepreneurial seizure takes over, right? We realize we just can't stay where we are anymore. So I definitely understand that. Awesome. Well, you're a young guy still, and you've scaled and exited a couple of businesses, and obviously you figured something out that a lot of people really struggle with. But let's get into it. Like, what is it that makes you think that, or that positioned you to successfully exit a couple of businesses where some people might be working their business for 30, 40, 50 years even, and never get to a successful exit? What was it that you were thinking about either going in during or the transition you might have made to say, okay, I do eventually want to exit this business, and made it a successful exit at that?
Yeah, well, I went into whenever I started my business, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to make an impact. I want to, be a lifer in this company that I've built. And I had no plans of exiting. I did a dozen plus acquisitions within that firm. We still had a ton of growth opportunity, and my heart just wasn't in it. And I think I made so many mistakes along the way, learned from them quite a bit, but ultimately why I exited successfully is I was able to take a step back and really intellectualize the emotions that I was going through, and remove the feelings from the actual business, which is a really, really hard thing to do as a business owner. And sometimes I've experienced in working with clients that can be hard, especially for men who tend more to suppress their feelings. But those feelings are there. You start something from scratch, you put your blood, sweat, and tears in it. There's going to be emotions that come up when you separate from that business, and that's really why I feel like I was able to exit successfully from the first and the second firm, is I was able to pull the emotions away and just look at it from a business perspective objectively.
That's a really good point. And I think it's something that people might, understand in theory, right? Like, okay, it's a business, and we say, oh, don't worry about it. It's just business, right? So we understand this at a certain level. But when it comes down to the day-to-day operations and running a company and making it all work, I think people do really get tied to it emotionally. And that sometimes clouds their judgment, sometimes makes them make irrational decisions or whatnot. But at the end of the day, they're doing what they think is best, but they don't necessarily think about, what the future might hold as far as how this company should be set up and structured for a successful exit. So when you're going through that process, you're saying, okay, well, I'm stepping back. I'm trying to take an objective look at my company. What was it that made you make this kind of shift into, okay, did you change the way you operated after doing that? Were there certain big aha moments that came out from you sitting back and looking at this? And did you have anybody kind of helping you through that process?
I've never really had a quote mentor that I've periodically and consistently met with. I've always sought out what I felt like were successful individuals that were on the same strategic level of thinking as me. So ask me the question again, Jeff. I'm sorry, my mind went down a rabbit hole there real quick.
No worries, no worries. So yeah, you said you at one point you said, okay, my heart's not in it. Let me step back and take an objective look at this business. What did you change after doing that?
So what I felt like I did a really good job of day one was focusing on the people and delegating. I mean, we all know whenever we're building a business, there's kitchen sink type duties that you have to do when you're a one man band or one woman band. Then you grow and you add a couple people. You're still doing kitchen sink type duties. So you're the CEO, the COO, the janitor, whatever titles exist in the company. And so you have a 360-degree view. And it was me trusting the people in their, I guess, zone of genius, if you will, and saw how they were a lot better at me at certain tasks. So I was able to find the right people, right person on the right bus, in the right seat on the bus, and let them work their magic. And even having done that, and I thought I did, as I mentioned, I thought I did a really good job of getting the right people in place. It was still difficult to pull things away, especially when things went wrong. It's our natural inclination. Hey, we know how to do the job. Let's jump in and take over control. But, it's really just trusting your people and letting them do their job. And if the business starts running smoothly and you're sitting back and you realize more and more each day, it's like, well, yeah, I started this thing. It wouldn't be here without me. It's following my vision, but I'm not really running the business anymore. I'm just steering the ship on a very high level.
Right, right. Yeah, I like that. I mean, obviously, we talk about that a lot, that the people are the business, really, at the end of the day. We have systems that run a lot of things, and the people have to run the systems. Um, However, I still find that a lot of people struggle with that, right? Because most entrepreneurs are typically type A personality. They're very controlling. They really want things done a certain way, and that sort of prevents them from moving in the direction of delegating as much as they might want, right? Like some people will delegate and then micromanage. And it sounds like you probably cracked the code on finding the right people that you didn't need to micromanage. Am I correct there?
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, I didn't do it perfectly. I was, I had to let go of the reins in tiered stages, but ultimately, once I did that, then things started running a lot smoother.
Before continuing, please subscribe and share this video to help us reach more people and stay notified of our latest releases. Now, let's continue watching and learning.
So what was one of the key hires that you made early on that really helped you kind of move in that direction?
It actually came from an acquisition. So I sold internally in my first firm, and one of the gentlemen sold to a couple people, but internally. But one of the people that I sold to, he was my first employee, and he was the COO for 5-6+ years before I sold to them. So he was integral, and us working together, we had completely different minds and how we thought. He was more of an operator mindset, where I had more of that visionary approach. But I would probably say I had a ton of great hires, but one that really comes to mind was my chief of staff, Randy Miller, no relation. And I got him from an acquisition, and he wasn't an employee. He was a customer of the firm that I bought. He was retired from Lockheed Martin. He worked on the F-22 fighter pilot program, was a director there. And military guy, really had his systems in place. And he heard about what we were doing as a firm and how we were making some changes. He was actually getting ready to leave as a client of the firm that we bought. And when he came in and sat down and learned about us, his interest peaked, and he started at a very basic level working with us, as doing administrative tasks, and roll up his sleeves, not entitled. And he slowly grew and grew, and in a short period of time, it was probably about 3 or 4 years, and became my chief of staff. And he came to me with almost all of the problems solved, and basically handed and put in front of me and said, David, what strategic decision do we need to make here? I've sorted out all the different problems and fixed them, for lack of better words, as much as they would. So here's the scenario. What do we need to do? And so by the time it got to me, I would just say, this is the decision that needs to be made. And then he would take it and he would go do it and make it happen. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I think having something like that is integral for especially a visionary CEO entrepreneur, right? And I just want to dive into this a little bit. You say chief of staff. I think that means different things to different people. I mean, most people have never even heard of a chief of staff except outside of the White House, right? So, what does that mean to you? Like, what did that role entail for anybody who might be listening, is thinking, "Oh, maybe I could use one of those."
Yeah, so we had our holding company, our C Corp, and under that we had numerous subsidiaries doing all different. We probably had 15 plus different service lines. So he would assess, and we had a COO. He was not the COO, but we had a COO managing the operations across those different subsidiaries. And he would keep a pulse on all the different operations with the COO. And whenever there was something within those companies that he felt was not aligned with the vision of the company, whether that, customers weren't happy, whether there was an employee culture fit that may not be there, and anything similar to that was off, he would come to me. So he wouldn't necessarily get in the weeds every day. He would just keep a pulse on what it was everybody was doing, and then educate me on a high level as to what was going on.
I think that's a really important distinction on what somebody like this does versus a COO, right? A lot of people will think as the CEO, especially if they've ever read Traction by Gino Wickman and they understand this visionary versus integrator kind of model, think, okay, well, I have a COO, they're going to take care of stuff, right? But a COO is very, I'd say, tactical. They can be very strategic, but most of the time they're very tactical in getting stuff done and making sure people are getting the jobs done. But like you were just saying, they don't necessarily have their finger on the pulse of all the different aspects, especially when you start talking about a holding company model and having multiple departments or divisions or subsidiaries underneath that. There's a lot that's going on. I think that one of the challenges most CEOs run into is, regardless of what they delegate, they still feel like they're wearing too many hats, right? And so they end up getting into the weeds. And it sounds like that was the thing that really helped you kind of pull back a little bit, stay at that high level and very strategic, but then have somebody that could take that strategic insight and then go to, the troops, so to speak, and get them to do the job. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, Jeff. I mean, that's spot on. So he did have that COO type mentality. He had, done the work, and that was his zone of genius in his prior career. But it's almost like he was in between that visionary and integrator, per the Wickman reference that you had. So he could see everything operationally going on. He understood that. He knew what needed to happen from a growth and visionary perspective. And he was that bridge. He would balance the two as to, what operational issues need to be brought to my attention that may not be in alignment with that vision.
Very cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what it is you do today, right? You work with CEOs and scaling up the companies, preparing for an exit, exiting their business, things like that. What are the types of industries you work with, and what are the biggest challenges that a lot of your clients are coming to you with?
Well, when it comes to the biggest challenges that people are facing, it's almost always the people. They're people problems. Yes, systems and structure oftentimes need to be put in place, and processes, and those need to be refined. But having that strategy set, having those core values, and then having the systems in place are all great. But if you don't have the people that are responsible for and accountable for the specific tasks and everything that you've mapped out, then all of that legwork kind of falls apart, and you're constantly in a never-ending cycle of trying to put out fires. So,
right.
So figuring out, how do you get the right people in the right seats? You get that Dan Sullivan. He has several books. One of them, Who Not How. That's that really hits the nail on the head. If you can find somebody who knows how to do a job, you don't need to know the how of it. You hand that to them, you trust them, you have that level of trust built, and they go and execute. So now you're looking at that relationship, that person, how do I make sure this relationship is solid, that trust is solid, and then, have them go do the how part of it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, an important insight. When I was early on in my career, I stepped into a supervisory role, management role, and all of a sudden I'm managing people 2-3 times my age. And I told my vice president, who was above me, I was like, well, I just feel kind of out of place a little bit, Frank, because I don't know what my guys know. And so I don't know how to help them necessarily. He goes, Jeff, one of the best pieces of advice I got, I don't need you to know what they know. I need you to know how to get them to do the jobs that they know how to do. Right. And I think that's such an important distinction between being an expert of all things versus being good at finding the right people to, again, like you said, fill the seat on the bus. So, question for you then, along those lines, is that how many times have you found out that the person who's coming to you that has a problem, and it turns out it's a people problem, how often does it come to light that the person really knows, like the CEO might know, hey, this person's a challenge or a problem, or they're not the right seat on the bus, but they've kept them along and kept them in the business and employment for way longer than they should have? Is that a pretty
Uh,
frequent thing or very infrequent?
so you're saying an employee comes to you and they're
Well, no.
feeding
So,
you.
like in your role, right? So you're working with somebody and you uncover it's a people problem, right? That's
Mhm.
why you're stuck. That's why you're not scaling. That's why you're not having the life that you want. You're not able to grow, or you feel stressed out or anxious or whatever. And you go through, I'm assuming, some sort of process with them to identify what the problems are. And they find out it's a person, or it's a personality, or it's the wrong fit. They're on the wrong seat. How often does that happen? And when it does, is it like, yeah, I've kind of known this and thought about that, but I just never took action about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, one of the things that I believe is addressing those important issues that aren't urgent are the most urgent things that need to be done.
Right, right.
And if that, it kind of sounds oxymoronic, but, people aren't going to tell you to do certain things. But, if you're looking at your business, you're assessing it, you're using your business acumen, balanced with your intuition and gut as to what needs to be done, especially when you're experienced, then those people problems are right there, and they've been talking to you figuratively the whole time. So, I've ignored it for years and years and years with some employees, and finally, life has a way of keep presenting the problem in different ways until you solve it. So, I think it's really just looking at the individual, if it is a people problem, and realizing, hey, they're a cancer in your organization, and not necessarily from a bad perspective. Like, that cancer needs to be removed, sure, but there's a place for that employee. They're not happy because they're not aligned with your culture and your values and the way that you do things. They will be aligned somewhere else. It's just not with you. And if you address that and you do it in an empathic way, you do it in an authentic way, and you actually work with that person, once you find out that they're not a good fit, then they can actually be one of those huge cheerleaders for you after they leave the firm. Whenever we would let go of somebody, my goal was to make sure that they were as happy as they could be, and we left on as good as terms as possible, regardless of the tough decisions and the hard messages that had to be delivered. So, if you deliver a hard message in an empathic way, that has a completely different result as if you're just, kind of people please. You don't want to upset them. It's already awkward because they're going to leave the firm. And if you just get all that on the table and be real and be a person, then they're going to have a 10x effect, whenever they leave.
No, I like that. That's important too. I mean, I've had to hire and fire people a lot throughout my career. It's never a fun thing. No one really enjoys letting somebody go, but I think you hit the nail on the head that if you can all align on the fact that it's not a good fit, and help them understand why you think it's not a good fit necessarily, and maybe give them opportunities to grow elsewhere. I think that does really help out, because I have had to let people go that were good people. It's just they couldn't get the job done, or it just was the wrong job for them. And sometimes they don't even know what the right job is for them, because they're still trying to figure it out in their careers, right?
Yeah, and I had um, the opportunity to be a part of a firm in an industry where there was naturally extremely high attrition. I mean, I'm talking 70, 80, 90%, depending on how you look at the numbers. A lot of your listeners have probably seen that movie Pursuit of Happiness by Will Smith, or with Will Smith in it. Those brokers, when they first start out, they, only so many of them last. And whenever I got into leadership and management at American Express, there were over 100 people that we would have to exit. And at the end of the day, people are human. They don't want to fail. They started a job because they thought it was going to be a fit. You hired them because you thought it was going to be a fit. So you learn a lot about people and how to deal with people by, firing them on good terms or bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a live and learn situation, right? We all have to, figure that out in our own time and way.
Yeah.
So I read something interesting about you that I want to touch on, which is you had a conversation supposedly with Warren Buffett and convinced him to buy a company. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, for the record, I'm pretty sure he doesn't even know who I am. So whenever I was at the University of Tennessee, my, call it sophomore or junior year, I was in Glocker business. I graduated early. That's why I said I'm not quite sure what year it was. I managed money for TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, their nuclear disarmament fund, through the College of Business. And, I was following the subprime lending manufactured housing sector, specifically manufactured housing sector during that time. And this is in the midst of the tech burst, early 2000s. And so Clayton Homes was one of the stocks that was in our portfolio, KB Homes, Toll Brothers, a lot of different ones. But our head of the portfolio, Dr. Auksher, had a connection. He was a huge intelligent investor, David Dodd, Benjamin Graham type philosophy. And, Buffett heard about the results that we got during the tech burst in 2000, 2001. We had I'm talking, we were beating the S&P by 1,000 basis points. And a lot of that was luck. And Buffett knows that, of course. But, he ended up taking interest in how we approached the margin of safety and those calculations. We presented the stock to him. The other gentleman was Mike Daniels, that was following the same sector as me. He was a lot better at his job than I was. And so, yeah, he ended up buying Clayton Homes. We were quoted as his cheapest investment banking fee ever. He gave a share of stock. He gave an A share to Dr. Auksher, the professor in the finance college. And, he gave everybody else on the portfolio team a B share, Berkshire B share. So that was his cheapest investment banking fee ever. He did a lot more due diligence than what some college kids said to him. But yeah, that's kind of what got me jazzed in the financial world.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, that would one of the richest men in the world and best investors ever comes up to you and it takes interest in what you're doing. I think it can't do anything besides instill a little bit of confidence, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah,
very cool.
Thank you.
Well, we're running down on time here, David. But before we go, I want to ask you one last really important question, which is, now that you're at this stage of your career, you've exited a couple of companies, you've been helping a lot of other businesses and CEOs with scaling up their companies and all of that. If you went back to the very beginning, what's one piece of advice you would love to be able to give yourself as you're getting into this line of work and this business?
Trust in the power of small business. If you're in America, actually the numbers here in Europe are very similar too, from a percentage standpoint. There's enough business out there for everybody. you have a clear vision, you trust in your capability, you trust in your passion, and you just do the disciplined tasks, be mindful and willing to learn and always open to learning, set your ego aside, then your business is going to be wildly successful. I made just about every mistake in the book. And, had I just had a little more trust in myself, a little more trust in, letting the process pan out with patience and a lot of other things, then, my younger self would have had a lot less headaches.
Yeah, I understand that all too well. It's one of those things when you get into business, you don't know everything, right? None of us do. And so we do start listening to a lot of people. And unfortunately, some of the times where the people we listen to don't necessarily either have our best interest at heart, they don't have the experience we might have, and they don't see the vision the way we see it, right? So we end up, unfortunately, following people the wrong direction from time to time. But I think that's how we learn, right? I think you're spot on. You got to trust yourself, and you adjust course if you make a mistake, but you got to trust yourself. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, well, David, how can people learn a little bit more about you, find you, and maybe contact you if they have any other questions?
My website, alchemyscale.com, or on Instagram, DM me. It's davidmiller.buzz. Either way.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we put that alchemyofscale.com in the show notes and all the other links to getting in touch with David. So if you are watching this or listening to this, make sure you check out those show notes, learn a little bit more about David and what he does with helping companies scale up and prepare for an exit and so on. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right. You've been listening to the Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions podcast from Angel Investors Network. Take care and have a great day.